And it started, this whole Portal Fest started because 3 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago, we applied for a grant from the Community Foundation about water heritage. So we wrote the grant about the portal that's over there that actually connects the museum property to Canalscape. Because before there used to be just an ugly chain link fence and no access. So as you can see, there was a lot of coordination, and I want to thank my colleague, Nicole, who worked very hard with SRP to put the bridge right there where the gate was going to be, so that people coming in from Canalscape, hikers, bikers, you know, can just walk into the beautiful park, which is this beautiful museum. So I'm really glad to be able to collaborate and to help more people know about this place, and also to do programs that really explore our humanity. So that's why we're here tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you my partner in crime, Mr. Zarco Guerrero. He's an artist, a mask maker, a sculptor. He's the one who made the portal, designed it, and got it fabricated. But also he's going to talk about some very important issues, which is the issues of water. As you know, we're living in a desert right now. I don't know how many of you are listening to the fact that the Colorado River is down. There's no water in the, Glen Canyon and all of those beautiful places over there. And so water is going to be really, really important to all of us. So anyway, without further ado, what do you want me to say more about? That's it?
Testing. Hey, good evening. I'm going to try to do this without the mic. I got a loud voice. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Except when the planes go.
Oh, yeah.
So do you think it's better to have the mic?
Yeah.
Live streaming? Yes. Sorry about that.
Better with the mic?
Yeah.
We have too many planes. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Well, I wanted to announce that we're live streaming on Facebook, right? So maybe later on you can watch it. Or have your friends watch.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming out. It's wonderful to have even a small audience and to be at this wonderful place on this beautiful evening with a beautiful moonlight here, bathing in the moonlight together. Thank you very much. I was born and raised here in the valley, not far from here, in West Mesa, right along the Salt River. You could walk to the Salt River from our house, and my youth was spent camping out on the Verde River with my father, who was an archaeologist. And so I spent countless hours wandering around the desert with my father. And he took me to all these sites throughout the valley. And at that time, there were many villages around this area that there were no roads to, ancient villages like Snaketown, which is now closed to the public. But in those days it wasn't, and the only access we had was by a four-wheel drive Jeep, and he knew how to get to these places. As a matter of fact, he used to be a guide and take people to these other archaeologists, to these ancient sites. So growing up, I got a lot of the history of what went on here hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago. And they weren't things that I learned at all in school. They were things I learned from my father, and then later I learned by studying and investigating. Because I always wanted to know what happened here, and actually what it's like. We just got finished celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and what I celebrate is pre-Hispanic heritage. Spanish heritage, Hispanic heritage celebrates the last 500 years of whatever you want to call it, cultural connection, conquest, invasion. I like the term invasion. And but beyond that, there's a much more fascinating history that we've forgotten about, or that has been erased from our experience, our education experience. So, welcome to the River Stories, and here we go.
bit shy. And I'm so excited because this is like my storytelling debut. I've never been asked to perform or to speak like in front of an audience and stuff. So like I'm really shy, okay? So please forgive me because I'm really nervous. But I'm really excited. I just feel so excited to be here and to tell my story, okay? So, you ready? Okay, here we go. I grew up here in the valley, okay? And like a lot of people, I crossed the Gila and the Salt River, I guess many times, hundreds of times, I guess you could say. But I never saw like a river, okay? I mean, like, all right, I saw like dry river beds and stuff like that. But I never saw like any flowing water, all right? Okay, I did see the canals, like all these wonderful, beautiful canals full of like really, like look like really beautiful clean water. And I just, I just took it for granted. I didn't know where the water came from, where it was going, and what was going on. I guess you could say I just didn't even care, right? I didn't worry about it. Like everybody else, I used a lot of water. There was always enough water for everything, for washing, for bathing, for watering the grass. Plenty of water. I never worried about it. And I just took it for granted. And anyway, it got to the point, like, when a lot of my friends were telling me, saying, hey man, you want to go like tubing down the Salt River? And I'm like, what? You mean like there is really actually a river? Like a Salt River that you can go tubing down? And they said, yeah man, it's like a lot of fun, come on, let's go. And I said, okay, now wait a minute. Hold on a minute. First of all, like on a river, like you can drown, okay? Like people drown in rivers and stuff like that. And like you want me to get like on an inner tube, like okay, like I could get bitten by like a frog or something, Like I really wasn't like interested at all, And then my friend would say, come on, man, it's so much fun, you're gonna love it. And I just say, no, wait, I'd rather stay home where I'm safe, So, but like what happened was like this one, like a couple of summers ago, it was so hot, I couldn't even stand it, and my air conditioner broke down. Like in the middle of the summer, So I'm like over there, I'm dying, I'm sweating, I'm like, like passing out and like dehydration and stuff. And my friends came over, hey man, come on, dude, we're going to the river, come with us. I said like, what? No, I told you I don't want to go. And they said, look, what are you going to do? So like, die here, like of exposure? Come on, the water's nice and cool. You're going to love it, you're going to be safe. Please, come on, let's go. And I thought, okay, all right, I'll go. I mean, I'm either going to drop dead here from the heat, or I'm going to drown, whatever. So I went. Great, a lot that place. So we get over like to the river, and they have like inner tubes and stuff. And like everybody like grabbed their tubes and they ran down and said, come on, let's go. And I was like, well, hold on, wait up. And then before I knew it, man, they like jumped in the water and then like started floating down the river. And I'm over there like terrified. Not even sure I could really swim. I hadn't even been like in a pool for like, I didn't even remember. So first of all, very carefully, I went down to the river, okay? And I just went down, and I just like stuck in my little toe because I wanted to see like if it was like really cold. I couldn't imagine it being cold. It was so hot. I put in my toe, and all of a sudden it was like, it felt so good. It was so nice and cool. So I stuck my foot in there like that. Oh man, it was so nice. I stuck my other foot. Oh man. So I started like getting into the river like little by little. Oh, it felt so good. It was so cool. And for the first time in weeks, I felt some relief from the heat. And before I knew it, I jumped into the tube. And there I was. And I was just floating down the river, just bouncing around. Oh man, it felt so good. I was so happy. I just closed my eyes. And there were no airplanes flying over. it was nice and quiet. All I could hear was the water. You know, it was just so relaxed. I couldn't believe it. And all of a sudden I heard, oh my God, what is that? And guess what? I looked up, and there was like an eagle, like a real live, a bald eagle, not like a regular, like a bald eagle. Okay, I didn't even know that there was like any bald eagles in the desert, and it was like flying around. Oh my God! I was just amazed. I couldn't believe it. And then all of a sudden, something jumped out of the water, just like a huge fish jumped out of the water. Man, it scared the heck out of me. I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I was scared. Okay, I was scared a little bit, but then it just felt so good. And guess what? We saw like a herd. I'm not talking like one, I'm talking like a bunch of wild horses drinking water out of the river. And there were even like some of them in the river, and they were crossing over the river. I was like, oh man, this looks like a movie, like a geographical, a National Geographic moment. I couldn't believe it. And I saw a fox. I saw like coyotes, and like all kinds of like big birds that they look like pterodactyls flying around, and I couldn't believe it. I was fascinated. It was over before I knew it. It was like 3 hours we were floating on the river, and I wasn't scared anymore. I was delighted. And I didn't want it to end. And I thought to myself, wow, what is going on? How come there's like a river floating like through the desert, but there's no like river over here that like Phoenix? What happened? So I started to investigate, and I started to find out more and more all the time. And one of the reasons I'm so glad to be here tonight, because we're going to hear a lot of stories about the river. So that was my river story. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you ever get a chance, go down the Salt River, float down the Salt River, because it's amazing. Okay. Hey, thank you very much. I'll see you later, okay? Hey, ¿qué pasa, raza? Hey, it's me, el vato poeta, your number one Chicano homo, eh? Hey, man, I'm here to tell you some river stories too, eh? Check this out now. Yeah. For over 1,000 years, long before the Europeans came to this continent, and long before the rise of the Aztecs in central Mexico, during the time of the Toltecs, from about, let's say, 200 BC, more or less, to about 1200 AD, más o menos, all of North America was called Semanahuac, the land surrounded by water. The Toltecs called the southwestern United States Aztlán, the land of the white cranes. Those beautiful birds you see flying along the riverbanks, even here in the valley today. The Toltecs called this place right here, that we now call Pueblo Grande, they called it Totonayac. Totonayac, the place of many ants. Yeah, the place of many ants. You don't think they would call it like the place of many scorpions or rattlesnakes or something. Why the place of many ants? I'll tell you why. Because Nahuatl language is a metaphorical language. So perhaps they weren't referring to the insects, but to the highly industrious and creative people
who lived here at this time. For thousands of years, native peoples have settled around the rivers that flow through the dry desert. In Tucson, they settled along the Santa Cruz and the San Pedro River. Here in the Phoenix area, they settled around the Gila and the Salt Rivers. Now these people, they were not only farmers, but they were great engineers and architects as well. They devised a very sophisticated water distribution system that took water from the rivers into a series of canals that stretched for hundreds of miles to irrigate over 500,000 acres of land. Check that out, eh? Hey, now check this out. Those canals were sometimes 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep. What? And they were built with wood and stone tools. Hey, now come on, man. How did they do that? Okay, now you see the canals nowadays, right? Okay, let's say they're like about 20 feet deep and like 5 feet deep and like 20 feet wide. Okay, so these canals were like much larger, right? And many, many more canals then than we have today. That's right. These people were called the ancestral Sonoran Desert people. Their descendants, the Hohoka, the Autumn people who live here today, call them the Huhuga. But the archaeologists call them the Hohoka. Because of this very sophisticated canal system, they were able to grow great amounts of corn, beans, squash, chile, and a very fine form of cotton. That's right. Yeah. They got a very high standard of living. They wove beautiful baskets out of desert grasses. They made beautiful painted pottery in order to carry and to store water. That's right. And they had a method of carving seashells that didn't exist anywhere else in the world. They harvested many desert plants like the mesquite trees for making flour, the nopal cactus for making nopalitos, and the prickly pear for making jalea de tuna. Ooh, that's a good food, eh? But sabes, you know what I like the best, man? The rivers were full of fish. Okay, now I'm not talking like little fish like that. I'm talking about big old fish, like the giant Gila Minnow. They said was over 6 feet long. And guess what? They used to smoke it over willow branches. Oh my God, I can smell it now. Fish taco. Oh man. But these people had it hooked up, right? You know, like I said, they had okay, look, they didn't like live in teepees and stuff like that. No, man. They had multi-story adobe villages. Like what today we would call like penthouses. You believe that? Yeah, man, they lived like in penthouses, man. For real. Now, they were part of the ancient Toltec trade route that stretched from central Mexico all the way down south to El Salvador and Nicaragua, up north to Chihuahua, to Sonora, and to beyond the state of Sonora, and to points west to the west coast, and beyond the Mississippi. Yeah, man, that's right. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I do now. And they used to trade with the Toltecs. They traded turquoise, eagle feathers, their baskets, and of course cotton, in exchange for the Toltecs' macaw feathers, chocolate, copper bells, and guess what else, eh? Obsidian mirrors. What? Obsidian mirrors? Yeah, obsidian mirrors. And guess where those obsidian mirrors were made? Have you ever heard of Teotihuacan, the pyramid of the sun? The only place where those obsidian mirrors were made was in Teotihuacan. And they made their way here and they used them for what? For vanity? I don't think so. They also shared the science of astronomy and the ancient ball game with the Toltecs. Yeah, that's right. They were connected, interconnected. They shared knowledge. But all good things must come to an end. And something happened around the year 1250 AD. Nobody's really sure, but they kind of come to the conclusion that it has something to do with the volcanic explosion. You don't even think of volcanoes over here in Arizona, right? Hey, man. Around that same time, a volcanic explosion happened over there north of Flagstaff in what today we call Sunset Crater. That volcanic explosion would have forced tons of volcanic ash into the air, and then what happened? You ever heard of climate change? Yeah. Well, of course, it would have caused many like forest fires. It would have caused, devastating floods and extensive drought. So then what happens? You have tens of thousands of people here dependent on a very, very highly sophisticated, complex irrigation system, but it's very fragile. One flood could devastate the whole system. And then you're not getting water throughout the valley. Now you're not planting any crops. Well, this didn't just happen right here in this area in Totonea, in Pueblo Grande. But at that time, all the major metropolitan areas in the Southwest, including Chaco Canyon, were abandoned. Now, where did these people go? They went south to Mexico. Hey, man, where else, man? They got pyramids down there and all kinds of stuff. I go down there, too. I still go down there today to see the pyramids. Check that out. As these people exited and they left the area, they now became known as the Chichi Mecca. The Chichi Mecca pilgrimage. And it took all these different tribal groups heading south at the same time. It took them, they say, 200 years, some say 300 years, to finally get to Lake Texcoco in central Mexico, that at that time was called Anahuac, land surrounding water, surrounding the Lake Texcoco. Many people believe, especially as Chicanos, that it was those same people who could have built the beautiful floating city of Tenochtitlan and were later called the Mexica. Today we know them as the Aztecs. It was predicted that the descendants of the Aztecs would return to their homeland of Aztlan. And guess what? It's true. Because here we are, los Chicanos. Aquí estamos y no nos vamos. We're back. Hey, thank you for letting me share my river story, man. Hey, I know miramos, man. Have a good night, eh? Woo.
Good evening. How y'all doing out there today? Welcome to the Pueblo Grande Museum. We learned from our ancestors, the Huhugan, how to live well upon the land. We continue to farm a great abundance of corn, beans, squash, and chiles, just as our ancestors had done. For hundreds of years, we traded with many neighboring tribes, including the tribes from Mexico. Our land we call Atom Jugget, stretched from the Superstition Mountains in the east, northwest to the White Tank Mountains, and all the way down south beyond the Mexican state of Sonora. We, the Pima, were long-distance runners, much like the Tarahumara. We had no disease, and our elders lived to be over 100 years old. Yeah, I wish it was 1,000, they'd still be here today. That's right. In 1690, when the Spanish arrived, we grew great amounts of wheat, whose golden fields stretched as far as the eye could see. Later on, in the 1800s, we traded with and gave comfort to the constant stream of white settlers who were passing through on their way to California in search of gold. Funny thing, gold never meant anything to an Indian. We, the Pima, gave thanks to the Creator for the sunshine, for our water, and we're grateful to our four-legged and winged brothers and sisters. I could surely say we did all we could to protect our Mother Earth and to keep her young and healthy. We grew so much crops that by the 1850s, we were said to be the breadbasket of the newly established Arizona territory. Without the Pima Maricopa Federation, there would have never been an expansion west. The settlers would have never survived the harsh conditions of the desert and the constant attack of the Apache. We, the Pima, were well known for our hospitality and generosity to outsiders. Why, when 430 Mormons arrived in the valley, they were hungry and weary from their travels. They were met by a large group of Pima who welcomed them with sacks of corn, beans, wheat, and gave them blankets and water and showed them how to live on the land. Many times we find white folks, sometimes whole families, lost and dying in the desert. We bring them home. We nurse them back to life, and then we help them on their way. I find it so ironic and inhumane that today we could be arrested for even attempting to give water to our neighbors from Mexico and South America that we find dying in the desert. They come here today for the same reason the first settlers came here. Why, we even fought the Apaches to protect the new settlers. And in 1896, we joined the U.S. cavalry at Fort McDowell to hunt down Geronimo. We trusted our new neighbors to do good upon the land and the animals as we had always done. We believed that our new neighbors, when taking water to water their crops, would do as we had done to make sure that there would forever be enough water for all. Boy, were we wrong. One day, a group of fur traders whom we had shared our food went out and killed
250 beavers in one day. That day was the beginning of the end of our ancient way of life. The beavers' dams ensured that there would always be water, even in times of extreme drought. As more settlers moved in and began to take water upstream, they took more water than they needed. They took more than their fair share. They wasted water, something we had never done. As they took more water upstream, our once mighty river was reduced to a trickle. Our once green and fertile fields were reduced to dust. Without water, we were forced to abandon our fields. The only life we had ever known for centuries. For the first time, we began to know hunger. So desperate were we to survive that we cut down the old growth mesquite forest where we played as children. This brought us great pain. Our esteemed and respected elders refused to accept the food rations that was given to us by the newly established Arizona government. They said the food was poison. And they starved to death. Many of our elders and our medicine people crossed over at this time. We were left orphaned. Eventually, we had to accept the wheat, salt, lard, and sugar in order to survive. These foods swelled our belly, but did little to soothe our soul and calm our broken hearts. Little did we know that these foods and the loss of our native plants, food, and medicine would have devastating effects on our community for generations to come. And the worst part of all was what they called welfare whiskey. The introduction of alcohol into our community has devastated our people and every Indian nation who has ever come in contact with this thing called civilization. So here we are, 2021. We have many casinos that make tons of money, but no amount of money can bring back the wealth and the health we once knew as the Akimelatam, the river people. Thank you. Testing. Buenas noches. Dios enseñamos. Oh, qué bonito, ¿eh? What a beautiful light. Ay, mira la luna, mira. Ay, qué bonito. Well, thank you very much for having me to tell my story.
about my people, los Yoeme, also called the Yaquis. Well, you know, by the 1900s, my people, los Yaquis, had been fighting for over 300 years against the Spanish invasion. 300 years already. That's right. And we continue to fight for this day, to this day, very day. Now, we weren't as nice and welcoming to the outsiders as our Pima's neighbors were. No, no, no. We fought fiercely to protect our land, our water, and our familias. The Yaquis were an agricultural, hunter-gathering society that lived in rancherias along the Rio Yaqui in the southern state of Sonora. It's well known that our land is some of the richest farmland in all of North America. And because our homeland was so rich in natural resources, we were invaded by the Spanish, and then later on, the Mexican government. By 1900, the governor of Sonora declared war on the Yaqui and began a policy of extermination and deportation. Many Yaquis fled the persecution, and we were welcomed by our Atom neighbors here in the valley. Well, it just so happens at that time, the United States government was building the Roosevelt Dam, and they needed good labor. Well, you got a bunch of Mexicans over there, all they want to do is work. Well, the Yaquis, we were river people too. We had a lot of experience in building canals and maintaining water systems, and we were well known to be brave and to be hard workers. So we were enlisted to join the workforce, and we helped to rebuild the canals, and we helped to build the Roosevelt Dam. When the Roosevelt Dam was complete, we settled around a couple of villages. The first one was a village of Péjamo. You ever heard of Péjamo? No, ¿verdad? Well, it used to be right there by Escatel, now called Escasquel. Yeah. There's still a little community of Yaquis there. It's right there by Big Surf, just north of Big Surf, Péjamo. Well, after they used us and abused us, well, then they wanted us to get rid of us, so they put us up on a big old rock over here that had no water. That place is called Guadalupe. I guess they were hoping we would just not have water, we couldn't plant our crops, and we would go back to Mexico. But we stayed, and we worked, and we were able to survive. We became American citizens, and we fought in every single gringo war, and we became a very powerful workforce, not only here in the valley, but throughout the United States. We helped make this country great. And nowadays, what? Once again, we're faced with the threat of deportation. After all we did for this great nation, desgraciados. Well, even though we're American citizens, we still continue to be a sovereign Yaqui nation, and we continue to fight for our water and for our land in Mexico. And we continue to fight here for social justice and for freedom. Bueno, pues I know you're tired, I'm ranting, although you don't want to listen to this old man, I'm tired of hearing myself talk anymore. So, bueno, muchas gracias, se lo agradezco, thank you for having me, yo sin Cheñavo, buenas noches,
Hey, how y'all doing out there tonight, eh? Hey, look good, huh? Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out here, supporting the museum and this little tourist town here. Yeah, I like to tell my stories the way I heard it from, my grandparents, great-grandparents. It was about around the late 1800s that the first white folks started arriving here in the valley. Well, many of them were passing through on their way to California in the gold rush, and a lot of people, they decided to stay. They liked the weather, and, they were welcomed by the natives who protected them from those pesky Apaches. The first settlers were amazed at the evidence they found of an ancient civilization. Why, there were multi-story adobe buildings found throughout the valley, including a village just up here on Van Buren. Well, they knocked it down to build Van Buren. It's not there no more. And they could see that the valley had been successfully farmed a long time ago. Many people believed, especially the Mormons, that this place was given to them by God to exploit, to develop, and to symbolize. Well, around 1860, a group of farmers had the bright idea, led by a man named John Schilling, to redig the canals. Well, in order to do that, they needed labor. So they brought in a bunch of Mexican Indians, and Chinese as well, all kinds of people, to help build the canals, to help build the water distribution here in the valley for the ever-expanding, growing population of senior citizens. Yeah, those Mexicans, they helped redig the canals, they helped build the Roosevelt Dam, they built the roads, they built the schools, they built the hospitals, they planted the crops, they harvested the crops, they made tamales, and they played mariachi music. That's right, they was a big help. Well, when the Roosevelt Dam was complete, now that ensured that there would be enough water for bigger farms, artificial lakes, extravagant fountains, tens of thousands of private swimming pools, and more golf courses than you could shake a stick at. The mighty Salt River had finally stopped. This finally meant that civilization had arrived at the Valley of the Sun. And mister, that ain't no bull. A yippee-i-o-ki-yay. Y'all have a nice day now here. And if you don't want to end up like me, then don't smoke. Hola, how are you? about our ancient past. And very sad at the same time to hear about the terrible, terrible tragedy of our river and our river people. She is very sad. I think about it all the time. Why did it have to happen like that? I don't know. It's so sad, but you know, is the past really over? Or are we reliving the past every day? I'm so confused. But one thing I know for sure is that lately we're starting to realize the importance of water. All over the world, many people throughout the world, they have no access to clean water, ¿verdad? See, we still have plenty of water right here, but why? Why? Because we have to be very grateful to the ancestral Sonora Desert people for the amazing water distribution system that they engineered over 1,000 years ago, ¿verdad? And because of them, we still have access to water. But that doesn't mean that we can waste water. No, we can't take it for granted. We have to do all we can to take care of our most precious resource, water. So I do everything that I can. I'm nothing but an old lady, you know. There's only so much I can do, but I'm passionate about this whole issue about water and the environment, because I have like a whole lot of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I know so many, I don't even know them. I don't even recognize them anymore. But I worry about them, you know, because I want them to have water. I want them to have a decent life, you know. So I try to share what I learned, and I like to share my thoughts and my feelings. And so that's why I like to write poetry. And tonight I like to share like a little poem with you, because that's the best way that I know and how to express myself. But in order to do so, oh my God, I forgot to put on my flowers. Ahora sí. ¿Cómo me veo, eh? I like to take my hair down like when I read poetry, you know, because well, you know, like I used to be like a hippie, you know. And so I feel more like a hippie. I feel more free and more uninhibited and all. And I want to be a hippie. I'm still a hippie, I guess, anyway. So anyway, here's like my little poem that I wrote, okay? It goes like this. There are many things we use each and every day. After we use them up, we then throw them away. Aluminum cans, paper bags, bottles made of glass, plastics we no longer need. It all goes in the trash. Stop and think about it. Where does the garbage go? And we dump it in a landfill and then we cover up the hole. Híjole, qué feo, ¿no? Qué bárbaro. Pesticides, toxic waste, rivers of pollution. People cause the problem. We are the solution. Doing it together, the job will soon be done. It depends on all of us, on each and every one. So remember, recycle, reuse, repurpose, use less and never waste. We only have one planeta. Don't throw it away. Bueno, pues muchas gracias. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And thank you for supporting the museum and all the wonderful programs here. Muchas gracias. Que Dios lo bendiga. God bless you. Bye.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Any questions? You guys have any questions? Any comments? While I catch my breath here.
Could you share how you developed your characters? I've known you over the years, and every time I hear it, I'm amazed.
Well, the question I get most asked most all the time. I consider myself a sculptor. I always wanted to be a sculptor. Should I just leave this on? Could tell I like it. I talk about the Yaquis in this performance, and I mentioned to you my father was also an artist, and he was very adamant about knowing our family history and wanted to share that with the rest of the family. And because we were so removed from, we're a detribalized people from Southern California, Mission Indians, and we grew up here in the valley, so very far removed from that culture, but surrounded here by the Salt River Pima and by the Yaquis in Guadalupe. I spent almost every year with my father at the Yaqui ceremonies, and at those ceremonies they used masks extensively. So it was at that point as a young man that I saw mask transformation. I saw a man wearing a head of a deer. I knew it was a man wearing a head of a deer, but when the music started and the movement started, all of a sudden the man transformed into a deer. I saw a deer dancing, and that I never forgot that. It was one of the most powerful things I had ever seen. And growing up as an artist, I pursued sculpture and painting. At that time, that's what I saw in books when I did research. Fortunately, our house was also full of books on history and on archaeology and anthropology. So I had a different vision of the world than most people that I was growing up around. I like to say that I grew up in two worlds. I grew up on the surface and below the surface as well, because there was another world, an ancient world beneath the surface, beneath the dirt, that my father introduced me to, an ancient past. And then later, after I got out of high school, I went to Mexico to study sculpture and painting, but I became fascinated with the mask art form. Not only the ancient masks that were, I had just been to Europe and I had seen Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Raphael, saw all the great European artists. But when I went to the museum in Mexico and I saw the ancient Olmec and Totonac masks, they were as refined and sophisticated as anything I had seen in Europe. But there was something different I saw in those masks. There were human expression in the faces that didn't exist in Europe, amongst the Greeks, amongst the Egyptians. If you think about it, all the sculpture just had like stone-faced people with no expression. But in Mexico, the masks were full of every aspect of human expression and emotion. So somehow that touched me so much, I became fascinated with the mask art form. And then I recalled my own experience as a young man, that magic. So as I searched out masks, dances and ceremonies in Mexico, I saw that magic again, you know, where the mask comes to life and breathes and talks and stuff like that. So I started to pursue, studying masks, just delving in masks. And because I was a sculptor and a portrait artist, it was natural to move in that way. So when I came back into the valley, I guess after living in Mexico for about 5 years, there was a renaissance of art going on at that time as a result of the civil rights movement and the farm workers movement led by Cesar Chavez. And that movement, that social movement, gave rise to a cultural arts movement called the Chicano art movement. And that was a time when artists, young artists like myself, were painting murals in the streets, were creating theater, were writing poetry. Cesar Chavez introduced us to this pursuit of identity and the importance it is for people to have an identity, because he was all about giving people their dignity. right? All working class people deserve dignity. And that's what Cesar Chavez was all about, service to others. So I wanted to share that aspect of my life and what I had learned in Mexico about masks and mask making. And so I started making masks for other theater companies, performance artists, dance companies. And when I saw them bring my masks to life, there was that magic, that transformational magic that I was fascinated with. And then somehow along the way, I had an idea to make masks for myself. And at that time, all my kids were very small in elementary, junior high school. So I would make a mask and get dressed up and walk around the house and start interacting with my kids. And if I could make them laugh, I knew I was doing the right thing. And it wasn't long before they became my directors. Hey, Daddy, do this, or say that, or no, you gotta walk like this, Dad. You gotta do this, you gotta do that. So they helped me to develop these characters. And I started with, I didn't know quite how to put it together, but I'm fascinated with the idea of archetypes. Not archetypes, but stereotypes. We think of stereotypes as negative. We always have negative stereotype. Oh, that's a negative stereotype. We're all stereotypes, you know. I'm a stereotype. I mean, look out the other. I can see you're a stereotype. You're a stereotype. There's stereotype right there. You know, and so in Mexico, art has a sense of humor. And no matter how serious it can be, there's always an element of humor and sarcasm. So the mask, to me, was a way to do that, to tell stories, to be able to, not hold any punches, and to, make the character laughable and lovable. All of my characters seem to be not good-looking people. They all have issues, a lot of issues with, teeth and wrinkles or whatever. But when they start talking, we realize how beautiful they really are, right? So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring dignity to these characters and to be able to address important issues. When I started doing it, my kids started listening to rap music, and I knew there was some good rap music, but what they were listening to wasn't good rap music. So I put together a show called Face to Face in a Frenzy that's mostly these characters. I use the same characters, but they talk about supposedly dysfunctional people who become functional, who overcome handicaps, stigmas, all of these things, alcohol, abuse. They overcome them, and then they share that aspect of recovery. And I think right now today in the media we see it. We celebrate dysfunction. Every time you turn on the TV, I look for a movie on all the different channels. I can't find anything that's not celebrating violence, misogyny, racism, all of those things. So this is kind of like, the mask is my special effect that I need to kind of, break the barrier between myself and the audience to deliver these messages. So that's the reason for the mask, so that's how it happened. Any other questions? Any other questions about the information? I mean, these are my stories, okay? I tell them from my point of view, and I'm sure there's a lot of contrary stories to the things that I talk about. The whole concept that I mentioned about Aztlán, this place being called Aztlán, is very controversial nowadays, not only here in the Southwest, but in Mexico, they're still arguing about it. Where was Aztlán? Was it an actual place? Was it a state of mind? And or what is it? We still argue about it. So that's kind of my interpretation of what it was for us as young Chicano artists. Aztlán was the idea, the notion of a homeland being somewhere in the Southwest where we found ourselves at this point, right? And just that concept, that idea gave a sense of identity and gave us a sense of direction to pursue a positive route in the work that we do. So, and I never heard the story told about the Osmo, about the Pima, the ecocide and the genocide that took place there. And I feel that's very important for us to know right now. You know, because that's still going on. Maybe not here as much what's going on in Mexico, with the Yaquis are still fighting the water wars. They've never stopped fighting the water wars in Latin America and throughout the world. Hopefully we don't arrive at a water war, but it's getting close. And here in Arizona, we've been very good about conserving water because we hear it all our lives. We still waste water, but supposedly not nearly as much water as other people's do in other places. Any other questions? No? Okay, muchas gracias. Thank you very much. We had a question, one more.
Yeah, how do you memorize, I guess, your script or like?
I don't know. Well, what I do actually, I write it down and then I record it. So when I take a lot of baths. So when I'm taking a bath, I put on my tape and I listen to it. And when I go to bed, I put it on and listen to it. When I wake up first thing in the morning, I turn it on. And so yeah, that's how it kind of, I can't remember what I did yesterday, but somehow I can remember these messages.
So is the asset plan your favorite thing to talk about in this script, I would say?
No, not necessarily. No, I like to do that kind of like as a, just kind of as an introduction. I want to make that connection between the Southwest and Mexico. To me, it's obvious. How do you separate wherever you find corn? The Toltecs were there, because that's where corn came from. You don't just give people seeds and say, "Here's seeds, plant these seeds." No, they need a calendar. They need engineering skills. They need to know how to irrigate. There's so many things you have to know to grow corn, especially in great abundance. And the thing that made it possible was a combination of corn, beans, and squash, which we call the milpa. And it's those three plants, the three sisters working together, that they're able to propagate and flourish. Without one of those elements, they're not going to grow to the same extent. And in Mexico, that's where the milpa comes from. And there's a saying in Mexico, without the milpa, you have no pyramids. Because it was the milpa that allowed people to flourish and to have a high standard of living to such an extent that they could work over a period of hundreds of years to create these great monuments and these great pyramids. So I think that interconnectedness is very important, especially right now in light of immigration that I call migration. We need to know these stories. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Moonlight.